Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last lecture of our Ancient Greek unit. Um, Ancient Greece and Egypt unit, sorry. This lecture is going to set the stage for the Roman Empire, which is exciting, right? But just to let you know, uh, in the next unit, we're going to move on to different ancient societies. So we're going to look at ancient Africa, ancient Asia, ancient India, and ancient Mesoamerica. So I'm really excited for what's to come next. But this will set the stage for the ancient world in Europe. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump right into it. So this is something that you need to understand. Last lecture, we talked about what Hellenized means. Hellenized legitimately means just more Greek-like. So as Alexander, as we know, conquered the known world, he spread his Greekness everywhere, right? And Hellenized or Greekized the known world. So the Hellenized world witnessed a blending of sorts of the ancient Near Eastern and Greco-Macedonian culture. In this lecture, we focus on the political events that followed Alexander's death and then various aspects of the Hellenistic world. So we look at the fracturing of his empire, his Hellenistic kingship, Hellenistic cities, Hellenistic culture or cultures, and Hellenistic Jews. Oh, we're going to go back to the Jews. We're going to examine what that looks like for them. So Alexander died, as we know, in 323. It wasn't clear who he wanted to be a successor, but his Persian wife was pregnant and soon gave birth to a son. Alexander's military commanders decided to support this son and a mentally handicapped half-brother of Alexander's as heir to the empire. These successors were mere puppets, and Alexander's commanders pulled their strings. Soon, however, these commanders began to vie with one another and even conspire against one another. One thing led to another, and eventually all of Alexander's family ended up dead. Following this, a number of Alexander's governors, former members of the companion cavalry, asserted themselves as independent kings. Alexander's empire, in other words, fragmented into a number of Hellenistic kingdoms. So here they are. We have the Macedonian up here. We have the Seleucid. We have Ptolemaic Egypt. Within 30 years, Ptolemy ruled in Egypt, Antigonus in Macedonia and Greece, and Seleucus in Syria. Asia Minor and points east, these kingdoms were often at war with one another. So this is what the world looks like in 200 BC in the European theater. Within another 100 years, more Hellenistic kingdoms had emerged. Parthia and Greco-Bactria emerged from the eastern portions of the Seleucid kingdom. Pergamium, Bithynia, and Pontus emerged in Asia Minor, and Greece itself developed into a patchwork of independent cities, just like Athens, so they go back to city-states, and new leagues like the Aetolian League and the Achaean Leagues. Despite fragmentation, the legacy of Alexander continued to live on. In the 2nd century, for instance, Demetrius, to the far right, this dude over here, to the far right, styled himself as heir to Alexander, and thus ruling rather distant the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. Hellenistic kingdoms had many features in common, and their kings perpetuated Alexander's legacy in various ways. Hellenistic kings, for instance, continued to rule in Macedonia and in Persia, fashioned as absolutists. They continued, that means like there's no form of democracy. They also continued to associate their persons with divinity. Arsinoe II, as depicted as the Egyptian goddess Isis in the middle, so right here. They likewise attempted to appease native cultures in various ways. Not only was Arsinoe Isis, but her father, Ptolemy I, like Alexander, was also a pharaoh Egypt, but he was of Greek descent. Still, there was discontinuities. Hellenistic rulers tended to keep native and Greek cultures and native and Greek peoples separated. Each had its own law. Each spoke their own language, like the Rosetta Stone is in Greek and in Egyptian. That's over here. So that company that calls themselves Rosetta Stone, they got it from the stone. Literally from the stone. Sorry. Each was presented with its own form of kingship. Ptolemy was pharaoh to Egyptians, but a Macedonian king to his Greco-Macedonian subjects. Each also had specific roles in society. So the Greeks, the minority, were favored in the government, but the Egyptians, the majority, worked the land like they always did. Unless they adopted Greek culture, then they could go on to do other things. So the Egyptian people did what they've always done, and that's farm the land. The Greeks, or the minority population, they controlled the government. The foundation of new cosmopolitan cities was another legacy of the Hellenistic world. Alexander founded 6 cities, Alexandria in Egypt being the most famous. Kandahar in Afghanistan is another. The Antigonids of Macedonia only founded 1 city. The Ptolemies of Egypt, on the other hand, founded a number of cities called the Ptolemais. However, the Seleucids founded the most cities, nearly 40. Some are very famous. Antioch in Turkey is one named after King Antiochus. Seleucia and Mesopotamia is another. These cities were islands of Greekness in a sea of native cultures. They featured the standard amenities of a polis and served as an administrative center for the government. They attracted tons of immigrants from Greece and Macedonia. At its height, Alexandria probably had 1 million residents, 4 times larger than Periclean Athens. And while Greek in nature, their populations were definitely mixed, always allowing Hellenistic cities to serve as a nuclei for cultural exchange and borrowing. Alexandria is our case study. So Alexandria proves as a case in point. Alexander founded it in 331, and his body was buried there, making it a pilgrimage site of sorts for his followers. The early Ptolemies strove to make it a cultural center worthy of its name. They encouraged scientists and scholars to come to the city and establish a research center there dedicated to the Muses. It was called a museum. Ow! Museums! The place of the Muses. Yes, it's where we get that modern term. They likewise constructed the famous Library of Alexandria, which attempted to amass in one location every known piece of writing in Greek and in other languages. Non-Greek works like Gilgamesh and portions of the Old Testament Bible were translated into Greek. Its collections were larger than the McFarlane's, by the way, which is the McFarlane is, I forgot to say this. So the McFarlane is the TU library. The TU library is huge, right? So it's bigger than the McFarlane library at TU. All this learning paid off, and these scientists contributed to the construction of Alexandria Pharos Lighthouse, a 400-foot tower that used mirrors to reflect a central fire. It replaced the Ishtar Gate of Babylon as the 7th wonder of the ancient world. So we are now going to fly into ancient Alexandria on Google Earth. Give me 1 second and I'll get us there. Sorry, just need to do this. So here is the bay in Alexandria. We're here, hi. The lighthouse is ruins, but it's out here. And it wouldn't let me get, like, there isn't somebody that took a picture of it that close. So it's a rough world. I've done the best I can, but it's right here. Let's see if I can get it in 3D. Hold on 1 second. Sorry guys, it's not letting me. I've been trying to see if I can get something as close as possible to see if we can see it, the ancient ruins. There's a cool fort right here, by the way, if you didn't know. See if this will give us a view. Oh wow, this is cool. It would be right here. I'm sorry, I can't get this close enough, but it'll be what I want. Okay, so that's where it was. That is the rendition of it. Anyway, so sorry I can't get any closer, guys. Let me go back. Okay. So Tyche, we talked about Tyche in our live Zoom call last week, but this is pretty cool. So life in Alexandria and other Hellenistic cities was potentially full of opportunities, but it could also be dangerous and full of anxiety. Greeks were disconnected from their native lands, their native gods, and their families. They now belonged to an impersonal and ambivalent state in which they had little say and which was frequently at war with their neighbors. Within the context, a new preoccupation or obsession with the goddess Tyche emerged. Tyche was the goddess of fortune and fate. Nobody could escape her. She was unpredictably kind or cruel, and in the end, she determined how your life would unfold. Tyche was a big deal in Hellenistic world. So if you look at this picture, she's literally stepping on a poor guy's shoulders. And Hellenistic society developed a number of mechanisms to deal with and even subvert her powers. Astrology was one such mechanism. It was born from a combination of Greek scientific observations about the universe and the Babylonian and Persian beliefs about the impact of heavenly bodies on humans. The idea was to predict a person's fate, reading the future in the heavens before it happened. It did not stop Tyche. It just took the unpredictability out of the equation. Your fate, it was still fixed. So then we have new philosophies that emerge. So new philosophies were another mechanism. Diogenes developed cynicism and advocated for the detachment from society, suggested that if you have nothing to worry about. Cynicism. People, when someone like says you're cynical, that's what that means. Epicurus developed Epicureanism and advocated that fear and desire were sources of pain, but that pleasure and moderation should be the ultimate goal of life. Finally, Zeno suggested that the world of fate actually operated according to a kind of intelligent design. There was hence no need to resist your fate, but just to go with it, stoically, as it were, just go with the flow. So religious and so this is kind of cool. So religion was another option. Some worshiped their old gods. Others turned to native or foreign gods like Isis in Egypt. Still others combined the two, creating new gods in the process. The term for the last is called religious syncretism. Here a hybrid of sorts was created, often very different forms and various components. Hellenistic Isis, for instance, bore little resemblance to her Egyptian predecessor. She was more of a combination of Demeter, Aphrodite, and Isis, and became a universal deity who protected her worshippers from Tyche. Serapis, a combination of Osiris, Zeus, Apis, and Hades, was her male counterpart. Worship of Isis, Serapis, and others, like the Persian god Mithras, developed into mystery cults. These were secret organizations and very personal in nature. And though a series of rituals, including baptism, inductees dedicated themselves to the deity in question. The deity then became their personal savior, or soter in Greek, protecting them from Tyche and even offering hope of life after death. Does that sound familiar? So Jews in Alexandria. Jews provide an interesting glimpse into the native experience of Hellenistic culture and society. Jews were welcomed to Alexandria as early as Ptolemy I and soon adopted many aspects of Greek culture. They learned Koine Greek, the common language of the Hellenistic world, and studied philosophers like Plato. Many, in fact, only knew Greek and knew little to no Hebrew. As a result, Greek translations of the Old Testament began to make an appearance as early as the mid-3rd century, and the Greek Old Testament is known as the Septuagint. This was the Jewish quarter in ancient Alexandria. Back in Judah, though, Jews tended to be more conservative and cautious in their appropriation of Greek culture. Some were Hellenizing, others were not. During the reign of Seleucid king Antiochus IV, from 175 to 163, the situation became critical. Jason, the chief priest in the Temple of Jerusalem, decided to make Jerusalem a polis and wanted to build a gymnasium. The traditionalists revolted, and Antiochus, in retaliation, sacked the temple. He then initiated a series of anti-Jewish laws designed to Hellenize the Jews by force. He even set up an altar to Zeus in the temple and sacrificed ritually unclean animals like pigs inside it. Some Jews, needless to say, freaked out and started a revolt led by the priest Mattathias and his son Judah Maccabee. They managed to retake the temple and rededicate it. The Hanukkah story. They had 1 day of oil. It burned for 8 days. So this is the story of Hanukkah. Anyway, after this, Jews of Judah continued to fight for the independence and sought outside assistance. And by 140, an independent Jewish kingdom had emerged for the first time in centuries. But here comes Rome. Two final points. First, though the Jewish revolt was anti-Greek in nature, our primary source for it is the second book of Maccabees, a biblical book originally written in Greek and modeled on the histories of Thucydides. Second, Rome was one of the outside powers to which Maccabees appealed to for assistance. And as you'll see from the map, with good reason. So as you can see, Rome has grown. They've taken over Greek, parts of Asia Minor. You still have Ptolemaic Egypt, which will come up later when we get to Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. But Judea becomes a vassal state, and this is where we get into more Christianity, because the vassal state of Judah will crucify Jesus, which is the Christian Messiah, in the name of what the Greeks tried to do to them. So out of anger and retaliation. That's it. So this sets the stage for our our Roman unit. Sorry, I'm so excited. So Roma is next after we cover a bunch of ancient civilizations. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.